Hey everyone, and welcome to Skin Hue, a monthly YouTube series where we will get together to talk about elevating our skin health and wellness while demystifying the healthcare system, allowing us to have a more modern and healthy lifestyle. Today, we are talking all things dermatology, from common misconceptions all the way to the services that work best for skin of color, with one of the industry's most sought after experts in skin of color, Dr. Chesahna Kindred, who not only has her own successful practice, she's a thought leader when it comes to clinical research in dermatology, and she serves as an active startup advisor to some of the industry's most forward-thinking technology startups. So with that, let's get to it. Hi, Dr. Kindred. How are you?
I'm good, Sheena. Thank you for inviting me to your first episode.
Here. I know. So we've been talking for so long, a little over a year, and throughout that time, we've had so many great conversations, whether they were purposeful during a meeting or the side conversation. So I knew I had to get you here, and plus, I want to tell the audience you are a strategic advisor for me personally and the efforts that I'm doing. So I think they're gonna really enjoy what we have to say today. But also, before we get started, I wanted to say that I'm super excited to film this interview, not just in your own practice, but your own building, because you have so many wonderful things going on. So, like, how does that feel, like, to be in your own space and to be, like, leading the industry forward?
You know, it feels like once it was accomplished, right, because it was hard, that we deserve it, right? It feels like we deserve to own entire buildings, to have institutions and build legacies that move our people forward. That's really what it feels like. I mean, you get a heartwarming feeling moment when you sign a deal, but when you have something like this and you're trying to build better, right? Like that's really what it feels like.
It is. So let's take a step back. I want to know what motivated you to pursue dermatology, the specialty, and then take it a step further and really focus on women like myself when it comes to our skin and our hair.
So for dermatology, I was the medical student who liked every rotation. I liked every field. Well, except for ear, nose, and throat, or ENT. That's when I learned I can't do mucus.
Yeah, that's true.
We all have our line, and what the line for me was mucus. But so I really loved everything, and I earned my Master's of Business Administration, MBA, between my third and fourth year of medical school. That's why I'm an MD, MBA, not just MD. And my advisor at the time recommended that I do research in a field that I had very little exposure to in medical school. And that was dermatology. So while I was in the business school, I did research with a couple of dermatologists. And I thought it was interesting, but I had settled for ophthalmology.
Oh, really?
Then I came back to the House of Medicine. And found that ophthalmology wasn't for me. It's very important, but I was too narrowly focused just on the eyes. And I felt like I was losing the patient. So when my two articles, got published in dermatology, I decided my fourth year, let me look into dermatology and just see that interest, and loved it, right? Because we're working on the patient from head to toe, inside out. It's a visual science. It was wonderful, and I ended up pursuing dermatology. Now, for the second half, for women like you, what's unfair, and I didn't know this when I decided to pursue dermatology, is that a lot of our textbooks, our images, our research, our curriculum, our exams are all based on white skin. Which I feel like if we were in an all-white country, then that would make sense, but we're not. We're not. And there was a disservice, and I was very, very fortunate that when it was finally time for me to train in dermatology, I matched, or I ended up at Howard University.
Wow.
There, the difference is we're taught to treat all skin types, all skin colors, all ages, and that's a part of the main curriculum. Right. Right now, there's a trend for like a side or a separate skin of color track, as if it's an elective. Right. As it's an option. Right. Like we or these group of people are options. Yes. Yeah. Like, you can be efficient and competent in treating them, but you really need to learn this over here. Well, at Howard, when we reviewed a research article, right, and all the participants were white, part of our discussion is, okay, so how would that apply to everyone else? Like that, it was built in the curriculum. Right. And I think what's fortunate about where we are today is it's not just Howard and a few people outside of Howard University that are screaming and shouting on the mountaintops like this is not right. There's a lot of people that are like, they're right. Right. That isn't right. And you as a patient are feeling that, right? We definitely do. And so that leads me to my next question, where we are moving along in the industry and you're starting to see more research and more articles mainstream talking about the disadvantages when we go to see a dermatologist, right? So why do you think there's so few dermatologists of color? And then also to add to that, why, I think you already addressed why there's so few dermatologists who can really precisely diagnose and treat skin of color. But like, why do you think that exists? If we can like dive deeper into that. Yes, because what I just said really just skimmed the surface. Yeah. And so we do take that deeper dive, which is why I chuckle, because I jumped down the rabbit hole on this particular issue. I will try not to take you guys too far down. But when we look at the field of dermatology, Blacks, we're only 3% of dermatologists. And that's if you include those that have immigrated from different countries in Africa, right? Then the numbers were just 3%. That's because we have to pull from a certain number of Blacks in medical school. Right. And there's a study recently that looked at Blacks in medical school and their interest in derm. And they found that, and this was summer of 2020, I believe, 0 Black men and 0 Latina men are interested in dermatology. Wow. Right. I don't care how much I care about Black men, a Black male dermatologist is going to reach a Black man better than I can. Right? That's like a very special group. Right there that we're not reaching the way that we should. Right. And then that's because medical schools are picking from a pool of college students. How well are colleges doing in getting Blacks into medical school? Colleges are picking from a pool of high school students who are on a track that starts in the 6th grade. So what determines if you get on the track that's college bound? What determines it, I believe, is if you take algebra before you enter high school. I think it might even be algebra by the 7th grade, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. Who determines if you take algebra in middle school? Your teacher? The 6th grade math teacher. And if they like you and have an interest in you. There are countless anecdotal stuff. There's a symphony of parents shouting that their child deserved to be in this particular course. And then there's studies showing that if a Black child has a Black teacher before they graduate from elementary school, they're more likely to graduate from college. So wow, I did not know that. It really starts in elementary school. Some would say even earlier, maybe so. And that's where there's low-hanging fruit, right? So if you had someone who was in medical school, they've already made it to medical school, they were interested in, I don't know, OBGYN, and then I come and convince them to go into dermatology. That's a low-hanging fruit, but I didn't really do much because OBGYN is important too. Right. We can't pick the ones that have already made it close to the finish line, right? We need to catch kids at the starting line and bring more of them up to the finish line. So that's why we're in this state that we're in, where the number of Black males in medical school is worse than in 1978. Wow. Worse. This is 2021. Right. Worse. It's like 40 some odd years. It's just gotten worse. It's gone backwards.
And so then that manifests itself in the treatment room when we go see someone.
100%.
Yeah. And so then how, as a doctor in dermatology, how do you deal with that? Right? Like when a patient comes to you after having had a negative experience, how do you deal with that?
So the context for that is after the Freddie Gray riots in Baltimore. And I witnessed the same thing when I was in medical school in Cincinnati. I witnessed the same thing growing up in Inglewood, California with Rodney King. And there is this sense of oppression, right?
Sure.
And so I wanted to see, and of course everyone's talking about the different ways in which they were neglected, disrespected, not taken seriously, etc., by the medical community. But I wanted to see how long could I go without a patient bringing up themselves such an experience to me.
Okay.
Right? And I can tell you, and I don't remember how long ago the Baltimore riots were, but I haven't gone a full week of seeing patients without a Black patient sharing their story about mistrust or misservice or something of that nature. Right? So when it first happened, would happen, the Freddie Gray trials happened, whatever, and we're all talking about it. But at some point, sis, I got to clear your psoriasis up, right? I'm trying to clear your acne, right? I'm not trying to go down that rabbit hole. And so, but you can't help but find a empathetic way to address it, right?
Right.
And so how it makes me feel, it feels like it sucks, right?
Yeah.
It makes me feel like I need my colleagues to step up their game and be culturally competent.
Right.
Thank goodness some are definitely the
making
case.
An effort. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
Making an effort. So my typical response is, I know, but we here now, right? Or, you're right, but I got you.
Right.
So that's a way, like, and it's just knowing that African American vernacular English.
Right.
Right, which is really important.
And it drives home the emotional point of it. Like when you just said, you got me, then it's like, oh, I can rest a little bit easier. I can relax a little bit. Yeah, for sure.
Yes, it's like, I hear you.
Right.
Right, it tells you, we had a whole conversation in just 5 seconds.
We did.
Right? And I can still take care of your psoriasis, your acne, your hair loss, what have you. So that's how it makes me feel, and then that's how I respond.
Yeah, and I think that leads to a lot of misconceptions. So what are misconceptions about dermatology in general? Because I know we talked about this before, because it seems like some people think dermatologists do one thing, nurse practitioners do something else, and estheticians somehow are like, you should see an esthetician before you see a dermatologist. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, can you tell us some, like, the misconceptions that we need to address? And just when we hear them say, no, I need to go see a dermatologist.
One of the biggest misconceptions is that we only do cosmetics.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
I believe that cosmetic dermatologists are probably some of the most popular dermatologists, right? Because it's a new, amazing, exploding field in the last 10, 20 years. But the bulk of dermatologists, like myself, are medical dermatologists.
Right.
Right? I like acne, eczema, psoriasis, hair loss, etc.
Right.
My niche is actually hair loss, but I like medical dermatology. That's one misconception. And that feeds into the second misconception is that the public, and especially Blacks, don't know that dermatologists are indeed the hair expert, right? And there's a whole arena of professionals when it comes to hair.
Right.
But at least when we're talking medically or diseases, thinning, loss, etc., it's the dermatologist.
Right.
However, going back to the first question, dermatologists really don't need to know that much about our hair. Right. And so what happens is Blacks especially meet that intersection between dermatologists being the hair expert and dermatologists not knowing Black hair.
Right.
And it makes it look like, okay, derms are not the hair expert. At least to the Black community, that's what it feels like. And then a very unfair burden is in place on hairstylists. Right, which in
true.
our community was the hair expert.
Right, exactly.
So that's the misconception is hair loss. And then another misconception, I think, is that derm is easy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Do think so. Yeah.
Please come shadow me one day. And you'll like there's some patients know. Right? Like once you see, like it is not easy, but we can make it look easy, but it's because it's a visual science, right? So we're trained on close to 4,000 different dermatologic diseases.
Right. So let's pause there. I don't think people probably even know there's 4,000.
There's 4,000.
Plus, I don't think people actually realize that acne is a medical condition, right?
Acne is a medical condition that deserves medical intervention.
Right. So sorry to cut you off.
No, you're right though.
But you talk to people, it's like, oh, I can just go this, but like that's a real medical condition. And for some reason, I don't know why we don't view it that way or why we view dermatology as not a serious specialty.
Until you need us. Right.
Basically.
So what happens is this, just something that's developed in the field of dermatology, we figure it out, whatever, and then something advances. And a lot of times that old thing that we don't really use anymore is now over the counter. Right? And it's not like it doesn't work, because at some point that's all we had. Right? Then this thing is common and is really safe, and we've moved on. Now this second category is available over the counter. So you'll find some things that work. Right. A couple of things. One, there are 10 things that mimic acne. 10. Any dermatologist can rattle off the 10 possibilities. Some things you guys will never see because it's rare. But remember, we needed to know what those things were. And if it's available over the counter, chances are we have something that's 10 times better. Right. By the time it's over the counter, it's because we moved on. Right? Oh, okay. One other misconception that I think is important is that medically we know what you need, what's best for you, etc. But sometimes you're not going to get it because your insurance doesn't cover it. Right? And it's what's unfair is when we prescribe a medication, we actually don't know how much it's going to cost you. We don't get to see how much it's going to cost. And that's the question we always have. Like, why did they tell us when we're sitting at the pharmacist's desk or, we're online, we're like, okay, there wasn't a different option for me. Yes. Like, why is this so expensive? Can somebody please solve that easy problem? So what it is I know your medical insurance, right? And how much you have to pay, but I don't know your prescription insurance and how much you have to pay. The pharmacist knows that. Right. But when something's denied or not covered, then we have to get involved on that side to try to help you guys get the medication or change it or something like that. And that leads to more frustration. Oh, right? So just imagine if I went to someone who wasn't Dr. Kindred, who didn't know skin of color properly. Right. So that was frustrating. I get home, now I still have to deal with the frustration, the anxiety of my skin. Then I have another frustrating experience with the insurance, and now I'm just like completely just easily. And it happens to even me, that whole scenario. It would be very helpful, since you have this amazing platform, I get to put it on here. If at the time I'm writing a prescription, how much is it going to cost the patient? How much so I can make a cost-effective decision. Exactly. And it's not like 10 years ago when there were medications on the $4 Walmart list. That's gone. Remember that. Right? That's gone. Yeah. And it's not like I can be safe and just give you a generic, because generics are ridiculously expensive as well. True. So it's getting harder and harder. It's really unfair for the patient. So when we also talk about delivery of care, I think we'll move to more the technology aspect later. But let's talk about how estheticians and nurse practitioners, what's their role in the delivery of care and aiding you, but maybe not necessarily replacing the dermatologist? Very good. So the way we describe it is there's lanes. Okay. And we all have a lane. Exactly. Stick to your lane. I'm a firm believer in sticking to your lane. Okay, so to not ruffle any feathers, I'm going to use hairstylist as an analogy. Okay. Because to keep everyone neutral. So I specialize in hair loss. I treat hair loss, PRP, lasers, growth factors, everything, right? And the stylist in my office does hair. I don't do hair. She doesn't diagnose and treat. And it's a beautiful symbiotic relationship. Our patients are actually better. My patients are better when they also see her. She's an enhancement. Same thing for our esthetician. Could I do a chemical peel? Yes, I can do a chemical peel. Yes, I can do laser. Yes, I can do a hydrofacial, so on and so forth. However, I can see more patients if I determine you need a chemical peel, know which type, know how it meshes with the other medications I'm prescribing. And then the esthetician, amazing, the nurse practitioner, amazing, carries out the chemical peel. I'm just giving an example.
Sure.
And then I can see another patient and make, and go down the decision tree.
Right, exactly.
Other thing is, there's an experience that one can get from an esthetician that you ain't gonna get with me. I don't have no aromatherapy and flowers up in my office.
Nice little bed.
Yeah, no.
How you doing today?
Right. Exactly. We're here to come get your skin clear, get you right.
Right.
Okay. Right.
Sure.
There's a different type of experience that I believe estheticians have the time to deliver that I don't. We actually, a couple of months ago, we actually stopped taking new patients because it was crazy. And and I'm only one person.
Yeah.
Right. So I need teammates.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying. There's one way I want to go with that with telemedicine, but before I jump over there, I want to talk about is more of a care team, right? So it may even be someone where they're triaging care, even for an esthetician, right? So I may go to an esthetician and I'm like, hey, I can't do this particular treatment. Maybe today we'll just do a light facial, but I need you to go see this doctor. So there's a trust referral. It's not just a referral, it's a trust referral and vice versa.
Two-way street. You're exactly right.
That's how I envision it as a care team.
That's another great point is there's so few culturally competent dermatologists. It's going to be forever before you get to see one of us. Right. And so the esthetician or whoever else is taking care of the patient's skin can see like, ooh, this bump, that's not a pimple.
And I don't want to touch it. Exactly. And so, that's a good segue into telemedicine, right? Because we know, like as you just said, you had to stop taking new patients, right? That's one issue. Or it may be you're from the state that I am, Colorado, Denver. I think there might be one that I saw on one of these platforms listed. He can't see every African American or other person of color in Denver, right? So I think telemedicine can help that, especially if we could work with regulation regarding multi-state licensure, right? So, like, how do you see telemedicine in dermatology?
What was beautiful was around the pandemic, we were just allowed to see patients virtually. And then the deadline had expired where we could only see patients virtually if they were in the state where we were licensed. Right. Which did a huge disservice, right? I think there is one Black dermatologist in Jacksonville. Yeah. Right? How many are in New Orleans? At least as of this date, I think it's 0, maybe one.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. You have to go to Baton Rouge or something like that. So, and it's not that you have to be Black to see a Black patient. Right. But typically, the Black dermatologists tend to be culturally competent, whether they want to or not, because
they have a lived experience too.
Yeah, and especially so. So the telemedicine was a great avenue for patients to find a dermatologist that understands their hair. Right. For example. Right. So you're so right about the multi-state legislation, but not only that, I think telemedicine was very important for my people who were not mobile for whatever reason. Right. For many reasons. Kids who were in virtual school and the parents had to stay home. And the parent needed a derm appointment. My elderly patients, right? There's so many rooms for just time.
Right.
So if you live in a place in an area where we live, like we live near DC, traffic is horrible.
Right.
Patients have to take off nearly half the day just to get through the traffic, to get to the office appointment, let alone the rush hour traffic they'll hit on the way back. And in 2020, early 2020, the technology for telemedicine sucked.
Yeah.
It sucked. That's why we didn't do it. We trained in, it's called Telederm. We trained in Telederm at Howard University. And I was there in 2009. When I graduated, yes, I knew how to do it, right? No, I wasn't going to do it because the technology sucked. 2020 forced the software companies to improve, to step up their game. Now that they've stepped up their game, a lot of us embrace it.
Right. And I think it's also a great platform because if done right, like you said, improving on the back end, the doctor can have a wider window into what the patient is doing.
Yeah.
So if on the front end, the patient is not just coming, to seek this quality care, right? But they're saying, this is what I'm using, right? And they can input that in there, or this is what I'm eating. So now the doctor, the dermatologist is like, okay, well, because I'm gonna be honest, I don't think we all tell the truth when we go to the doctor, right? We're like, I'm doing it.
I use
like,
it every day.
You're not, right?
Yeah,
so now you're saying like, okay, like now I have this complete picture, and so now I can better provide you care. Like I really feel like telemedicine can provide this 360 experience, not just for the patient, but for the dermatologist as well.
That's such a good point because you can input some of this medication on your own free time. Right?
Exactly.
But when you walk into the office, you have a line of patients behind you, like after you and before you.
Exactly.
So you don't have that much time to tell me your favorite ice cream flavor. Right. Which is that's what we describe it. Or if you say, I'm using this new soap. Which one is it? What's the blue one with the white top? Okay. I know that company. Which one of their soaps are you using? Well, it's the one that smells like
Right.
I can't figure that out.
I can't help you.
Bring it with you next time.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Versus if you're at home, you can run to the bathroom, grab it, and show me through the telemedicine platform or input it before our appointment.
Exactly. And then just going further down the technology aspect, we hear a lot now about AI or artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Like for me, I think if it's done right,
that's the thing.
It can actually just improve the delivery of care, the life of the dermatologist. I don't believe it will replace a dermatologist. And how do you feel about that?
Right. So regarding AI, all AI right now, I don't care how fancy it is, still needs human input, right? It still needs a human to do something.
Exactly.
And we use artificial intelligence in our office for our hair analysis, for our hair density checks. But the problem is garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
So when it comes to machine learning, if they are, as it's been the case, only learning on white skin, it's going to be wrong for us. And so while we need to encourage Blacks to participate in whatever machine learning is necessary, is the decision maker that needs to say that device, that software, that AI is subpar. Go back to the drawing board and come back when you're culturally competent, right? That's the investor, right? That's the purchaser, that's the manufacturer, supplier, whatever. Like, no, this is garbage because you only did it on one type of American. Right.
And even still, you need to have the quality of images, right? So you need to have like these high quality clinical images.
Yes.
Then you need to have images that are, not okay. Then you need to have some that are just like, okay, I don't know what this is, because then your software is be able to get smarter and smarter and determine and reject the ones that are not quality, right?
Yes.
So especially if you think about it, if it's someone who's not necessarily familiar with skin of color, it's making a recommendation, not the diagnosis, but the recommendation. So they're like, okay, now I can make a better treatment because they may be a little bit, inexperienced. I don't know if that's the right word to use with treating skin of color.
Which is that's just still the case.
Yeah.
At Howard, we would have been considered incompetent if Howard only focused on Black skin, right? We would have lost our accreditation. But there's still institutions to this day that are thriving, but only focusing on white skin, right? So you're going to have dermatologists that maybe were not trained well in how psoriasis looks in blacks.
Right.
Right? Which is different. How eczema looks in black. It's different.
Right.
Blacks tend to have a more follicular eczema more often than, say, a white patient.
Okay.
Well, let alone all the people in between. Asian, Latinx, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Right? That can sometimes straddle the fence in both categories. So I don't think there's anything wrong with a suggestion, because sometimes it just didn't come to the dermatologist's mind the first time. Right?
Right.
And everything in dermatology, every condition in dermatology has a mimicker.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes you'll just think about the most common one, won't think about the mimicker.
Okay.
Or you'll think about the mimicker and not the most common thing. A suggestion is fine.
Yeah. But not any, I don't see a, let's take that part out. So we talked a lot about research.
Oh, yes.
Which leads me to clinical research. So we hear a lot of talk about that right now. So before I ask you some more particular questions about clinical research, can you briefly explain to everyone out there and to myself what clinical research is and what it's not?
Yes, what it is not is going on your daggone phone and pulling up Google, inputting a word and calling that research. If you want to annoy a dermatologist, say you researched and all you did was Google.
Right.
So what research is, and especially clinical research, is to simplify, we take a group of patients.
Okay.
One half, we give them a medication for a disease that they have. The other half, we give them a fake medication for a disease that they have, and we see if there's a difference. And what we expect is the patient with the medication improves, and the patient without the medication stays the same.
Right.
That is tremendously more complicated than that.
Sure.
But we need something along those lines before we as physicians can recommend it.
Right.
Okay. So for that reason, that's why clinical trials are key. Because if we do the research, let's say we just do the research in white men.
Okay.
Right? And where the biology is somewhat different, the skin biology is different than other groups, even between white women. If we just do research in just white men, in the real world, it's not going to pan out. In the real world, typically, the results will be worse because the dose, the frequency, the type of cream, the type of ointment, whatever it's placed in, the pill, whatever, was optimized for the group in whom were participating in the research. So the key is, along what we're talking about anyways, when we do this research, the participants need to be as diverse as possible. That is, if we want the research to be relevant in the United States.
Okay. So when you're doing these clinical trials, how do you go about getting patients how do you go about getting these patients responsibly? So there's a trust factor that, going back to what we talked about before, right? When you said, I got you. So it was like, okay, I can rest and make sure like these individuals are going to be my advocate when they have my data, my information.
We're discussing the well-deserved mistrust that our community has in the medical community. The key, I believe, for anyone who's trying to do clinical trials or trying to do medical research is to hold the trial where the patients are. Right? So there's plenty of derms, such as myself, where our office looks like the United Nations, right? Every type of person walks into our office. If I do a clinical trial, the patient population reflects this country. Right? Or if we need to tweak it, like maybe we just want kids, maybe we just want adults, maybe we just want women. But you still have that diversity. If you go into an office where the patient population is pretty homogenous, then that's what the clinical trials are going to look like.
Right.
And I think that's what's happening. The physicians that are asked to do the clinical trials only have one type of patient in the first place. And there's only so many Starbucks gift cards and Amazon gift cards, you can entice diverse groups to come too. So it's a very easy problem to solve. Blacks to get into the field of medicine have to jump through hurdles anyway. Right. I promise we can carry out clinical trials.
I'm sure. I'm definitely sure you can. So speaking of terms of clinical trials and the output, and then combining that, what you see in your practice, are there particular like ingredients or skincare treatments that work best for skin of color? I think that's a hot debate right now, especially around ingredients, and products formulated especially for skin of color.
That's the case. It has a lot to do with the excipient products, or I'll just say the vehicle to simplify it. So when hair comes up the most when it comes to this, and that is a lot of medications are in a gel, in a solution, or in a foam that are way too dry because of a high alcohol content, and it breaks our hair off, right? We tend to navigate or even gravitate towards oils and ointments. Ointments being like Vaseline based.
Sure.
So that way it doesn't dry our hair out. I can count on my hand the number of topicals that are in an oil or an ointment or in a solution that doesn't dry our hair out. And this is out of thousands.
Sure.
That exist. I can put it in my hand. And it's for things that are designed for the scalp. For the skin, we're fortunate is that in the vehicle, there's not as great of a difference. So it's not so much the vehicle on the skin compared to the hair. For the skin, the issue is if it's too irritating, then in our skin, it backfires and we get a brown spot. We get a brown footprint that's left behind.
Sure.
And for that reason, we tend to want to prescribe brand name products because they tend to be less irritating. But then we run into an insurance issue. We can't always get it for them. And so then instead what we do, and the patient ends up paying the price, we say, okay, start slow and then gradually build up to using the medication. That way the irritation isn't too severe and you don't get that brown footprint.
Right.
Next is something that's very important for our skin that is essentially ignored and is an afterthought, is that brown footprint, the hyperpigmentation, the post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation or PIH. A lot of patients will call it a scar. So that's why I always emphasize. If you can't feel it, it's not a scar. But so I'm going to just say PIH. Now that I wrote down what it was. A lot of medications don't incorporate how well it works for PIH. So I'll use eczema as an example. In my white patients, I just need to clear up their eczema. Their skin looks perfect when the eczema is under control. For a lot of my black patients, after the eczema is under control, they're still not clear, and that's because they have the PIH left behind. Then we need to treat the PIH. Right. And sometimes the medications we need to use for PIH is a little bit too irritating for their eczema. And so we go low and slow. We start with a low dose. Up, or the patient has to pay out of pocket, because one of the greatest sins in dermatology is that PIH is considered cosmetic. Okay, well, you're not coming in for Botox. You had psoriasis, right? You had eczema. You had whatever condition that now still has a discoloration that can be quite socially debilitating.
That's interesting.
You have to pay out of pocket to finish treating the damage that the psoriasis has done.
That
Again, we're not talking about Botox for wrinkles. We're talking about your psoriasis. We're talking about your acne. That's something that has to be changed.
It definitely has to be changed. So I know we're coming to the end of our time today, and I wanted to say, we've covered so much. But if there was just one thing you wanted myself or the women watching us today to take away when it comes to their skin health and their wellness, not necessarily, a treatment or using sunscreen, but like something else that's going to really help them manage their skin health? What would that one thing be?
That one thing be
that's a short list. You can go to 2, maybe 3.
Okay, so there might be 2, but believe it or not, while we are talking about sunscreen, what I want everyone to know is that it has to include protection from blue light.
Okay.
Now, the blue light from our tablets, cell phones, computers is actually more damaging on brown skin than white skin.
Really?
Right. So we are not, like, sunscreen is not protecting us from skin cancer. And I know that's something they say.
It is.
A lot. Sunscreen is still important, anti-aging for us, so on and so forth. But blue light for us is almost more damaging than the sun. Do you feel like you aged more in 2020?
Probably.
Than any other year? Like you saw creases and lines because we were in front of a screen for so often, for so long. So I think that's something that we still have to bring awareness about. The next thing that we need to know is you absolutely deserve a culturally competent dermatologist.
Absolutely.
If they're telling you to wash your hair with a horribly drying shampoo every other day, they're not yet trained. Yeah. They'll get there eventually. Yeah. But they're not yet trained, and it's okay.
And also, from my own experience, when I went to a dermatologist, when I was searching for someone to help me with my skin challenges, it was, we can't treat you because of your skin. And I feel like a lot of people get that. And I want other women to feel as though it's not you. We're not the issue. Our skin is not the issue. Who we are as a people is not an issue. It's that other person doesn't have the skill or the technology to do it. So just get up.
Get up.
Find someone.
Go find someone else.
Absolutely.
We use lasers for black skin every day. It can be.
It can be done. That's a whole other.
It's a training thing. It's and there are definitely institutions that have upgraded their training. Absolutely. They produce culturally competent derms.
Absolutely. So thank you again. I know this will not be the last time we have these conversations. Maybe the next one we'll get on another episode as well.
Sounds good.